Fractal has been building high quality PC cases for a long time, but more recently the focus has shifted to airflow and cooling with the Meshify and Torrent cases, which is an important feature for us gamers. Fractal has now launched its latest Meshify case, the Meshify 3, which comes in black or white colours with or without tempered glass and RGB, and in regular or XL sizes. In this review we're taking a look at the regular size Meshify 3, but it's the Ambience Pro RGB version, which sounds exciting, but is it? So this Meshify 3 is a case that I've been really interested to take a look in, because I actually used to use for quite a long time the Meshify 2, which I thought was an excellent case. I used it in one of my own personal rigs, and I also used it for a custom build. In both situations it was an excellent case. So this is the new Meshify 3. This is the regular one. There is an XL version which is larger than this. It's the Ambience Pro RGB version, so it comes with RGB fans and some other RGB goodies, including a fan stroke RGB hub with the case. The US MSRP price is $140 for the solid side and tempered glass side without RGB. The RGB version is $160, and the Ambience Pro RGB version is almost $220. You can pick up the Ambience Pro version in the UK for £205. The RGB version is £150, and the regular Meshify 3 is £130 at scan. Fractal originally planned to release this case early this month. However, due to ourselves and other media finding issues with the tightness of the PCIe slots and having difficulty installing graphics cards in their samples, the company delayed the launch globally to resolve the issue before release, which it has done now with a revision of the slots, so the problem won't be experienced by the end user. So well done to Fractal on that one. According to Fractal, the Meshify 3 offers top-tier cooling performance via a front mesh panel and 4 included Fractal Momentum 14 fans, aerodynamic chassis design, and an air guide that directs airflow towards essential components. The Ambience Pro RGB version features advanced ambient lighting with a startup effect and software-free customization stored on the included Adjust Pro hub. It supports eATX motherboards, 360mm radiators, big graphics cards, tall CPU air coolers, and ATX power supplies. It's also available in different versions with or without tempered glass and RGB, and there's also an XL version for when you need more space. The original Meshify and the Meshify 2 looked quite similar. They were deeper and shorter cases, but this looks a bit different. It's more squashed in the depth and seems a bit taller than the previous cases. So let's take a look at how you get inside this case. There's a lot of tool-free panels, so it should be quite easy to access the case. You push the tempered glass side panel off from the back, and that releases really easy. It's just on some quick release pins at the top. This white version, the tempered glass, is completely clear. The right hand side panel comes off in the same way, so you just push it out and then it just lifts out. It's a completely plain steel side panel. There's no sound dampening material on there. It's pretty rigid. It feels quite well built, that panel. To remove the top panels, there's a little tab at the back. You just pull it backwards and then it releases. Quite tight, this panel, when you first remove it, but as you remove it and install it, it does loosen up a bit, because this doesn't have much grip on it, this material, so it can be a bit awkward to remove it for the first time. You can see it is quite an open vented top panel, and it has ultra-fine mesh in there, so there's no additional dust filter with that. Front panel also removes quite easily. It just pulls out from the bottom and completely releases. You will see from some of the B-roll that there's an RGB strip that goes all the way around this panel. It's illuminated with RGB lighting. You can see again, it's a really open vented panel, and again, it's ultra-fine mesh. It's got like a ridged texture, almost like a rock face or something like that on the front panel, which gives it a bit of a unique look. So all the outer side panels and front panel are really easy to remove tool-free. On the top at the front of the case is the front I/O. On there you have a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, 2 USB Type-A ports, and a combined audio jack for headphones and microphone, and there's also a power button. So in terms of the cooling support, this Ambience Pro version comes with 3 Fractal Momentum 14 fans, so 140mm fans at the front, ARGB, PWM control. They're all installed on the front panel as intakes. You can also install up to a 360mm radiator in that front panel. This top section, this does remove two. There's a couple of thumb screws on the top there. The one at the front is a bit tight, but you can just get them out with the fingers, and then that lifts out really easily. On here you can install either two 120 or two 140mm fans, or up to a 280mm radiator, which means you can also install a 240 or 120 radiator on there. With that top panel removed, you've got unrestricted access in from the top here. So if you install a radiator on there and fit it back to the case, and you've, say, forgot to connect up EPS power to the motherboard or something at the top of the motherboard, you should just be able to loosen the screws, lift that up a little, and then connect up anything you need at the top of the motherboard without having to disassemble or partly disassemble the system. In terms of motherboard support, it supports up to eATX, so that also includes ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX motherboards. Maximum graphics card length is up to 349mm long, and the maximum CPU cooler height is up to 180mm. At the side of the motherboard tray here, you've got a cover that covers up the cable management holes. Potentially, if you install eATX, you may need to remove that cover, but also there's a couple of thumb screws that hold it in. The thumb screw at the top stays in position, but you have to remove the bottom thumb screw, and then you can adjust that backwards and forwards. So if you install eATX, you should just be able to squeeze in an eATX board and leave that in position if it's pushed all the way to the front. The only problem with that is it looks like it might interfere with radiator installation, especially if that is pushed right to the front of the case. You could potentially remove that. If you do remove it, you can see that the holes there for cable management, they don't have any grommets on, so they might look a little messy when the system is all built up. One really interesting looking feature is the power supply shroud. It's at full height at the back of the system here to install the power supply. It is vented on the top there so that you can have the power supply either with the fan facing up or facing down. But at the front you can see it drops down here, and there's like a big air scoop. Almost reminds me of something from a 90s modified car, like a turbo bonnet air scoop, but working in the opposite direction. So this is designed to direct airflow to the graphics card in the attempt to improve cooling. Spin the case around, look at the rear. It's a pretty conventional ATX mid-tower style layout. Fan mount at the top with a vent for 120mm fans. Cutout for the rear motherboard I/O. 7 PCIe slots. Below that is the power supply mount, so it's mounted to this bracket that removes a couple of thumb screws, hold the bracket in position. You mount your power supply to that, and then slot the whole thing in from the back. Inside this right hand side, there's about 25mm of clearance between the motherboard tray and the side panel, so there's plenty of space there for cable management. You'll notice the cutouts for cable management, so there's a large one at the top there for passing through EPS and fan connectors and connecting to headers at the top of the motherboard. There's the two down the side of the motherboard there, and then below there are some cutouts on the power supply shroud to feed cables up through to the headers on the bottom of the motherboard. You've got these plastic brackets, 3 plastic brackets here, and a channel for running the majority of the cables down here. These can be extended or pulled out completely. They're on kind of a ratchet system, so you can have them set at different depths depending on how thick the cables are that are managed in there. You can hear the ratcheting system. That seems to work pretty well. It should be able to keep cables neat and tidy using that system. There's also a couple of storage brackets on here, so you can install either 2 3.5-inch drives, or you can install 2 2.5-inch SSDs in each. So potentially you could install 4 2.5-inch SSDs using both the brackets, or you could install 2 2.5 and a 3.5-inch drive. And if you remove the turbo air scoop, there's another 2 2.5-inch drive mounts under there. The RGB and fan hub included with the Meshify 3 is the new Fractal Adjust Pro hub. It looks very similar to other RGB and fan hubs. The main thing about this is the connections on the ports. They look very much like USB Type-C ports. So the fans are sort of proprietary fans. They link together, so the 3 fans are linked together, daisy chained together, and then connect up to this hub. And the good thing with this is there's technically no software required to run this hub. It's all done by a web browser app. You can configure the hub there, and then all the data is uploaded to the hub and it's stored in the hub's memory. Good to see on this white version that Fractal's included all white cables with white headers on. The HD audio cable always looks a bit odd with those multicolored cables, but it's good to see white cables and white connections in there. There's space at the bottom for managing cables, but you are a little restricted to the length of the ATX power supply. It does obviously support ATX size power supplies, but only up to 180 millimeters. So there are some restrictions, certainly with this case, with these new dimensions. Then a quick look at the floor of the case. There's 4 plastic feet on the corners of the case. There's anti-vibration rubbers on each of those feet. The front portion of the floor is solid. There's no need for airflow in there because it just goes up to the scoop at the front, which is blocked off from the floor. And then towards the rear of the case, there is a dust filter. You have to remove it from the side, but you can see that is a plastic frame. It does incorporate a bit of the foot on that with a nylon dust filter, and then you can see there is an open vent for the power supply fan. In terms of accessories included with the case, you don't get a lot. You get a Meshify 3 user guide. It's very informative, that guide. It's similar to other Fractal case user manuals. You also get this small cardboard box with a few little bits and pieces in, so there's all the screws needed for hardware installation, a few zip ties, and there's a couple of adapter cables for the fans and the Adjust Pro hub. For the test system build, I use an AMD Ryzen 7 7800X 3D CPU. Motherboard is an ASRock X870 Steel Legend Wi-Fi. Graphics card is the 3D RTX 4080 Super X3 OC White. For memory, it's 64GB of G-Skill Ripjaws M5 RGB DDR5 6400 232GB modules. Storage is a 1TB Corsair MP700 PCIe Gen 5 M.2 NVMe SSD. The CPU cooler is the Fractal Lumen S28 RGB 280mm AIO. Power supply is a Seasonic Vertex GX1200 80 Plus Gold ATX3 PCIe 5 power supply. The fans used for thermal testing are the stock 340mm Fractal Momentum 14 fans installed at the front, and I did alter the configuration of the case for thermal testing and added a 120mm exhaust fan in the rear of the case. If you want to check out the full testing methodology, there's a written review page over at kitguru.net. All the testing methodology is on there. For the thermal load, it's a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway stress test run simultaneously for 30 minutes. We tested the Meshify 3 Ambience Pro thermal performance with the case in several configurations using the stock fans and adding a rear exhaust fan. The default configuration is with a top mounted 280mm AIO and 3 stock 140mm front intake fans. In the default configuration, using just the front 140mm stock intake fans, the case does well at keeping both the CPU and GPU temperature controlled. With an average load temperature of 64 degrees C over ambient for the CPU and 43 degrees over ambient for the GPU, we would consider these as good figures for a high airflow case. Changing configuration has little effect on thermals. Removing the glass side only dropped the CPU and GPU temperature by 1 degree C. However, removing the mesh panels dropped CPU temperature by 3 degrees C, which is not significant, but it may suggest the mesh is a little restrictive. Adding a rear fan also didn't significantly affect either the CPU or GPU temperature. With a custom fan curve set to low RPM at idle, a system built inside the Meshify 3 can be configured so that it is almost silent. However, with only a 280mm AIO supported in the top of the case, under load with a high power CPU, the noise can be quite loud, as seen with our test system reaching up to 52 decibels under load. In this scenario, most of the noise is coming from the AIO CPU cooler, so choosing a good quality AIO with quiet fans will be the key to keeping noise low with the Meshify 3.
With 20 years of PC manufacturing experience, CyberPower PC are the best in the business. With the largest range of parts available in the UK, our team of experienced builders will expertly build and test each system to be delivered to you the very next day. Check out cyberpowersystem.co.uk.
So the installation process as a whole isn't too bad inside the case, but got one or two things that I'm really not happy with the Meshify 3, especially considering this is a Fractal case that usually produces really high quality cases. The first thing that I noticed when I got this out of the box and initially started removing panels is the amount of flex in the chassis. It's not so noticeable when you've got the top cover on and an installation inside it, but without a system installed, there is quite a lot of flex in the frame. If you take the top panel off, there's quite a lot of flex up in this top section too, but with a radiator, motherboard and everything installed in there, it does improve how the chassis feels. And also some panel alignment, it isn't quite perfect. This top panel originally was quite difficult to pull off. the little tab at the back, it doesn't have much grip to it, so you can't pull it off easily. But once you have removed it and installed it a few times, it then becomes really quite loose, and it can quite easily come off just by grabbing hold of it if you want to move it. Sometimes you might just pull that out of position, so that's a little bit annoying because there's no areas to put screws in to hold that into position either. Again, this isn't something I expect from the usual high quality from a Fractal case. And also the dimensions of this case, or maybe more so the naming scheme that Fractal has chosen with the Meshify 3. It seems a bit off compared to previous Meshify cases. If you are familiar with Fractal cases, you'll know that you normally get a regular version, an XL version, and a compact. The regular version usually has the dimensions to fit a 360 or even a 420 AIO at the top and at the front, and you're able to get in custom water cooling, everything you need. The compact case is exactly what it says, it's more compact than that. Usually there's some compromise with top AIO installation, and the XL is just for when you want to go crazy. Multiple radiators, multiple GPUs, etc. Usually it's quite a bit bigger than the regular case. But this is the regular case, and we can only fit a 280mm AIO in the roof. I don't know whether Fractal has changed the naming scheme so that with the regular version we're looking at what would have been the compact, and maybe the XL is more like the regular version. But I found with this regular version, the dimensions are a little disappointing for me in the fact that you can't fit a 360mm AIO in the roof. You are restricted to a 240 or a 280, which means you may be compromising on some cooling surface area, and therefore, as like we've seen in our thermal and noise tests, the noise levels are increased because the fans on the AIO maybe are working a bit harder, running at a faster RPM than if you had a 360mm AIO up there. So there's a few things that, for me, the Meshify 3 disappoints really compared to the previous Meshify 2. I used the Meshify 2 for a long time, absolutely loved that case. I wouldn't go out of my way to buy one of these Ambience Pro version because I also think it is quite high in terms of the cost. Just with the 3 fans and the Adjust Pro hub, it's over £200 in the UK. There's a lot better value cases out there that offer similar airflow, cooling and features of the Meshify 3. You can get a lot of good cases for a lot cheaper than this. But it does have good airflow, great thermal performance, good for running a high spec system with a powerful graphics card. The RGB lighting on this Ambience Pro version looks very nice, and I really like the idea of not having to install RGB software and using the web browser app to control RGB lighting. So if you are a Meshify fan, then you might quite like this. So that's the Fractal Meshify 3 Ambience Pro. Let me know what you think of the case in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to Kit Guru if you're not already subscribed. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you could always head over to the store, pick up some of our merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.